Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Wilson back from the Creativity Zone. So tonight I've got a fun special thing to share for you in my Creativity Zone. Uh, Getting ready to get started for a fun video here. I created a cool sculpture after spending lots of time and thought about how to build and add details with cardboard. This is the second part here of a related to building with cardboard, but tonight I am focusing this video's art type all about paper mache. So it's all about the fun and simple old-fashioned type of art you can make known as paper mache. And there's different recipes, but I'm going to go with the most simplest one and do a cool demonstration on this project. So I created this fun dragon-like creature that has, if you can tell, some eyeballs and facial features in the front. And this is its body. And I just made sure that everything was securely attached. It does have technically a fifth leg. It's just for support. But the bottom part here, you wouldn't really see as well as the top and everything. And I'm going to paint this too. So it's going to be a fun activity that I'm sharing. But just tonight, I'm just showing you what happened with the sculpture. I decided to use cut paper tubes to create this neat pattern of like scales. And if there's a few of those that are a little floppy, but they're attached at least with one thick piece of masking tape rubbed down all the way onto the cardboard. And if you can take your sculpture, if you build something like this and shake it and nothing seems to fall off, then it's probably going to stay. And then the next part will be to add paper mache. So I'm actually going to use this round piece of cardboard as well at the end to attach my fun, whimsical dragon to, so that after it's all paper mache, I can have fun and paint and create and even put things down in there. I don't know. I guess that we'll see what happens when I'm in that creative zone. But for right now, what I thought I'd do is switch gears and put this cool project to the side, so that I could show everybody how to create the most basic, easy paper mache recipe. The most basic recipe you would need requires flour, which I keep in my house in a container like this to make it easier for cooking. And you need something to mix the flour with water. So what you'll want to do is have a mixing bowl of sorts. And I just use stuff from my kitchen. And then you'll measure out 1 part flour to 1 part water. So equal measurements. I'm using a cup here to get started. So if I just use 1 cup of flour and dump that in a bowl, then I would also want to use 1 cup water. Now, I prefer to use hot water, and there's one other ingredient that I'll share in just a second, but it's another item you can find in your kitchen real easily. So just going to dip 1 full cup of hot water right in there, and then I'll just leave this to the side. And then I'm also going to sprinkle a little bit of salt. Actually helps prevent the paper mache from getting any kind of moldiness if you do that. It's just something that helps preserve it. It just doesn't have to be a lot. I just sort of shake it like I was seasoning. Okay, so that's it, except that you need a whisk. If you didn't have a whisk, you could use a fork. I prefer to use a whisk. And you'll notice that I've already made a batch. It's hard to see probably with the white, but there's a batch already in here that I made earlier so that it's already been set up. It takes a little bit of time to set up. I'm going to stir this up real good. And it basically makes a gluey texture. And all you're doing is using flour and water here, really, with a little bit of salt. And the tricky part is to measure how much of this do you need for your project, because basically you're making a binder to connect or glue to take paper and stick it onto a cardboard surface or other paper surface so that the pieces can go together and mesh. It wouldn't work to build a sculpture easily if you used plastic or styrofoam, because it doesn't want to hold and connect with the paper, and it doesn't absorb water. I have made projects with paper, attaching them to like plastic bottles and stuff, but I just always wrap that first with tape and more paper. So I thought I would just go with using cardboard because it's easiest. Okay, now real quick, I'll show you that it is gooey, which is nothing to be afraid of. It's almost like dealing with pancake batter. If you are worried about getting your hands super, super sticky, you could wear a pair of gloves. What I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be backing up and showing a demonstration of how I'm going to paper mache this fun activity. So I'm also going to say that because I am working fast here at home, or I want to work fast, I am going to put on a pair of gloves because I think that'll make it easier for me to create a demonstration video here for any and all my students or students around who are watching that would enjoy seeing how to do this. Okay. Hope that everybody's doing well. I've been super excited about creating this for one of the art choice boards here. And what I am going to say is I'm going to scooch my laptop all the way here, and I'm going to push it down so that this area is where I'm going to work. Now, if you were really, really worried about your workspace, you could do this outside. You could do this in the yard. You could do this on an area like with plastic paper that you plan on, or like a plastic coating that you plan on throwing away. I have a tablecloth here, which has actually got a little bit of paint on it from the other day. So I'm just going to do it straight on this so that if it drips, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be going and washing it anyway. So whatever is convenient for you. If I was a kid watching this video when I was your age, I would probably have done this in my kitchen. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you too, in case you didn't know what this was. I just ripped and actually cut up a bunch of thin white paper. Normally, people use newspaper for paper mache because it's made out of a paper called newsprint. You could use that. This is just a real thin paper too. I like to use white because I like to just have a very plain white background to paint on top of. But you use what you have. If you have newspaper, there you go. You could just use that. And a lot of people think that newspaper is the way to go because it has a better quality. It has a softness that everything really just sticks really well. But just use what you have. You could always use construction paper of different colors. You can even use tissue paper. But if you do use colored tissue paper, you got to watch because when you get it wet, some of it bleeds and then the dye can go off onto your fingers. But if you're not worried about that, yeah, or you have a pair of these handy to have fun with your paper mache, that also may work for you. Okay, so this is something that I am still recording live, but what I'm going to be having fun doing later is to see if I can speed up the video where I'm actually paper macheing so that instead of it taking a really, really time to watch me, boys and girls can watch in a quick way to see some techniques. Okay, so what I'm doing here, careful not to get this on my laptop. I am taking the paper mache paste that I dipped it into, which is, like I said, it's just like it's almost like pancake batter. I'm pulling so that it's sticky all across, all over the paper, but it's also nice and wet. And you can see it's starting to get soggy. And then all I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start sticking this in and pushing and layering it on. And I am first going to do the easiest areas. The easiest areas will be where it is really, really flat. And then the areas where it is curly, those parts will be trickier. So I would do them after I've ordered the flat areas. I am going to stop talking and just close up with this activity here. It's more light in my studio. And all right, so for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm just going to continue paper macheing. the ear here. shoot. I almost fell off my chair. Okay, so I am going to try to fast forward what I just showed you later when I edit this video and stop here before I start that with the chair. You make sure I got my chair. Just to show you something else as I'm in the middle of the paper mache process. I have lots of tubes on hand with this project. Because you're dealing with paper mache and it is made out of water, the water is heavy. So as you start building, what you realize is parts of your project may want to flop. So this part is the front of my dragon face, if you remember, and the neck, I wanted it to be straight. So as you can see, I made a great design choice by just propping these extra tubes in here, which I could paper mache over one or two, or actually, yeah, if I put one here and one here, it would be a long, strong structure there to cover with this paper mache. I'll talk for a few minutes here as I continue, just to point out that if you haven't been noticing exactly what I was doing, or when you watch the playback, because it's going to be fast forwarded for sake of time, if it's not clear what I'm doing. Every time I dip a piece of this paper in this paper mache batter, it's basically batter. It's 1 part flour, 1 part water, sprinkle of salt. It is kind of sticky, so it's very sticky. So when you layer it, it's better to just sort of smooth it out so that you're not putting too much on. But as you can see, like right here, what I'm doing, it's really easy to take a strip of this paper mache paper and just drape it, and you can have fun. And like if I want to tuck inside that tube, I could, or I don't even have to. I could just hang it over the edge. I'll go ahead and give my students, or any students watching this video clip, a little history about paper mache as well. And by the way, you may notice that in my studio behind me, I have several skulls, and that relates to these fun lessons I taught my students this year and other years about a cool Mexican holiday, Day of the Dead. So I have some things behind me to create a scene in my studio with things from my classrooms, and those things are just sort of behind me there. But piñatas come from Mexico, and the way piñatas were made were traditionally with this very simple paper mache recipe. You can find other recipes that call for glue, or even a formula that somehow somebody is selling that it's called paper mache paste. There is this one kind that I really like called art paper mache paste. It's like a box for $2 if you can find it at craft stores. That's a powder, and you mix it with water, and it makes a gallon, and it's real gooey. And it basically it's glue. But I wanted to make this video using something that you would probably have at home, because you can buy a bag of flour anywhere, and most people keep some kind of flour in their kitchen for cooking, for other things as well. It's just one of these wonderful household items. And again, so you can see how nice and wet that paper is getting, and it's really pliable or able to be used. And what I'm doing is sort of just figuring out how to place the paper so that I can drape the wet paper covered in the mache on and around, and then be able to smooth out the cracks and connect the pieces. And be aware as you do this, if you choose to do this, I am using this as a choice board activity, but if you want to do this, you don't have to be as complicated as I'm doing. I just really got excited today to build this sculpture, and I wanted to do something beyond the traditional balloon. I know a balloon is something that a lot of people learn to paper mache. It is really hard to get it started because it wants to slip on you because the balloon is hollow, and until you get it going, it's tricky. But I just thought it would be more interesting. This is my personal choice to do something that wasn't a balloon, something that was cardboard, because you don't have to worry about it popping. Okay, I'm going to say that after this part here, I'm going to continue to just keep sculpting. Hopefully the video is showing how I'm using my fingers. Although I have to be honest, I can feel the details, but these limit me. So I'm just going to do that now. I'm going to get my hands dirty. Why not? It's just flour. And this bowl is actually almost empty. So for this, I would say I'm almost halfway done. And this bowl had 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of water, sprinkle of salt. So in that other mixing bowl that I had used, I demonstrated at the beginning of the video, it should be set up now. It's 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of water, sprinkle of salt. And I just like to use a whisk, but these are the same couple ingredients that people use to make noodles, as well as a few other things, even pancakes, perhaps, biscuits. There's all kinds of things you can make using just basic flour. I'm going to put a little bit of extra salt in it. Why not? Okay, I'm going to go back to focusing on pushing my laptop, not too close to the batter, but, or the paper mache paste, I should say, closer to the camera, and finish this up, and it will go back into a fast forward speed for sake of time before I wrap up this fun video from the creativity zone. Okay, so that's a signal for me when I watch this video back that when I put my green bowl that has warm water in it to take a break and rinse off my hands in water, I can take a break and dry my hands and then use my towel to touch my computer. That's what's weird about this for me, boys and girls, if you're watching this when I post this video, that I have to be careful to have my laptop out of range for getting bumped with anything for the sculpture lesson, but also I don't want to have anything get on something simple. You create a sculptures using just cardboard objects. You can totally create a paper mache sculpture as well by just adding that fun paste. It is messy, but I'll put my screen up a little higher so you can see me. It is messy, but I tell you, it's really fun and it's really cheap to do. It can even be a fun family project where somebody in your family can help you. And what I will show you is, because the paper mache is based from water, when you build your sculpture, what you have to remember, almost like a STEM project, is that once there's a lot of weight going on the sculpture, as in the paper mache paste, because it's got water in it, until it's dry, it's going to want to pull in places. So, for example, I'm going to hold my sculpture up that isn't done. The head just wanted to bend back because it's so heavy. So I continued to prop with paper tubes. And if I had something else like, oh, I've got a box, I'll use that. See, there we go with the creativity zone. I'm here with my creativity. I'll just use I had all kinds of stuff saved for this project today. So I was just using stuff from my house. I could even prop this in here. And what's cool is, by me not paper macheing either of those tubes or that box, what's good is once it's dry, I can actually pop that out. I'll also show you a fun little trick here. On the front of my face for this cool little dragon that I made, the teeth are stuck on the front because they fell down. But I want them to stick out. So I'm going to do something similar where I pull them up, and this is the bottom part. It seems like now that it's starting to get thicker and drier, not completely dry, but it's fun to kind of play with it because you can sort of see that it won't get completely stuck together. I'll turn that this way. The one thing I have to do for the finishing touches is I have to go around and make sure that each of my curls are covered. That's been fun, but a little challenging because see if I can turn it so you guys can see what I'm talking about. The curly parts that I created with tubes, when I dipped them, and I'm sure you saw this, but when I dipped them in the paste, there's a little bit left for my first bowl, and then I put them on these, I have to wrap them around and then go in the flow of the shape of the curl. I think I got all of them. Oh, you know what? I missed one. So I'm going to turn it around just to make sure that everybody could see in the fast forwarded version. How did I do that? Okay, there's one. That one right there. So it's got that curl going. So because it's smaller than the piece of paper I have is in width or size, I'm going to take it and stick it and fold it in around. So every time I do this, and I just noticed too, like I used some of the paste from the first bowl that had been sitting empty-ish for almost 10 minutes. I just dipped my fingers in some extra water. That's a good point to make. If you make this paper mache paste on your own and it's a little bit too thick, add a little bit extra water. If it's too thin, do the opposite. Add a little bit more flour. And what I would say is, if you want to try this as an activity, it is super duper fun. It may be a little bit more challenging than some of the other activities that I have posted, but the point here is that I'm sharing some fun artistic activities that you may want to try at home because you would really like to try something interesting with art. And again, paper mache has a very long history. I can tell you a true story as I wrap this up. So another true stories from Mrs. Wilson. The first year I taught in 2002, 2003, I had this one first grade class every same time every week. I had a 5-day schedule. So you had the same kids, like Monday at the same time. And I think it was Mondays or Thursdays. I don't remember the other week, but it was in the afternoon. And when we would have fire drills at this school, the principal wouldn't tell us if there was a fire drill, there was a fire drill. And I tried to have this first grade class paper mache balloons, traditionally this way with balloons, 3 times in a row. And it was the strangest thing because the first time their hands looked like mine. They were halfway done with their balloons. And then there was a fire drill and we all had to just stop, go outside. And it happened literally 2 times in a row with the same class. And they were only in first grade. And I think they finally got like, this isn't going to work. And that is one thing that I would like to share. My point of the story. True stories from Mrs. Wilson. If you are at home with this activity and there's only 1 or 2 or even up to 5 people in your house, doing this activity in your home is probably going to be easier than trying to do this in the classroom, because depending on how big you make your project and knowing that you only have so many tables and places in your house that you can make messy stuff, if it's something you make at home, this is one of the projects that unfortunately art teachers may not always get a chance to do if they only can teach you for 45 minutes. So if you have unlimited time, you could really take your time and do this over several days in several steps. Speaking of other steps, I am going to be having fun and adding paint to this as a final video. But I think what I'll do, since I'm noticing that this video has got up to about 46 minutes now, I'm going to say that if you watch this video, I'm very excited that you were interested in seeing the cool choice offered by Mrs. Wilson here in the creativity zone, the art of paper mache. I'm trying to think of what I worded it, because every time I make a video, I can create a title. So the art of paper mache. You could also blend glue, Elmer's glue, like white plain glue, into the mix. It makes it a little bit easier to manage, but you tend to need more layers of paper, where what's great about this kind of paper mache is you only need 1. So if you haven't seen the full effect here with what I have done in this project before I close up here from another evening in the creativity zone. If I turn this project again into the front, it was I'm making like this cool dragon project. So what I have to do, and I got this one leg that I can see has some issues. It's like a tire that needs to be inflated. I'm going to finish wrapping these around with the paper mache paste and attaching it to this board by just continuing to paste and add by dipping and continuing. I'm going to continue to also figure out another way just to see if I can play with this to prop it where I want it before I stop for good. And when I let this thing set overnight, I'm going to leave a fan on it on low. And I'm doing that so that it will totally be dry by tomorrow. So maybe tomorrow or the day after, I can create another fun video. Meanwhile, again, thank you for joining me, Mrs. Wilson, art teacher here from the Creativity Zone, as you have maybe learned a little bit more about the art of paper mache. Thank you so much. And I hope that everybody's doing well. And even though I've got messy hands, happy weaving hands.